The three men in black suits thought Hazel Cooper was just another small-town waitress pouring coffee at Murphy's Diner near the naval base. They watched her refill cups, take orders, and smile politely at customers for 2 hours before making their move. What they didn't know was that Hazel had been watching them back, and she'd already identified their weapons, counted their backup exits, and memorized their faces. When they slipped the poison into Commander Mitchell's coffee, they had no idea they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. Have you ever been completely underestimated by someone who thought they knew exactly who you were? Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone ignores. Hazel Marie Cooper had been serving coffee and apple pie at Murphy's Diner for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. To everyone in the small coastal town of Millbrook, California, she was exactly what she appeared to be. A 28-year-old single woman who'd moved to town for a fresh start, rented a small apartment above the hardware store, and settled into the quiet rhythm of small-town life. She knew everyone's regular order. Bill Thompson, the retired postal worker, wanted black coffee and wheat toast every morning at 7:15. Sarah Martinez, who ran the flower shop, preferred chamomile tea and a blueberry muffin on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The naval personnel from the nearby Coronado base rotated through different shifts, but they all appreciated her quick service and the way she never asked questions about their work. What none of them knew was that Hazel Cooper wasn't her real name. What they didn't know was that she'd chosen Millbrook specifically because of its proximity to the naval base. What they definitely didn't know was that the friendly waitress who remembered their favorite breakfast orders had spent 12 years as one of the most lethal operatives in the United States Navy SEALs. Her real name was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Elizabeth Cross, and she was supposed to be dead. 3 years ago, during a classified operation in Eastern Europe, Cross had been captured by enemy forces while extracting a high-value intelligence asset. According to official records, she had died during interrogation. Her body never recovered. There had been a memorial service. Her parents had received a folded flag. Her name had been added to the wall of fallen heroes at SEAL headquarters. But Cross hadn't died in that basement in Prague. She'd escaped after 72 hours of captivity, eliminating 6 guards and 3 interrogators in the process. However, her extraction had revealed something that changed everything. The enemy operation had been fed information from someone high up in U.S. intelligence. There was a mole, and they knew Cross had discovered evidence that could expose them. Rather than return to a compromised system where she couldn't tell friend from enemy, Cross had made a choice that went against every protocol in the military handbook. She disappeared. Using skills learned in counterintelligence training, she'd created a new identity, complete with employment history, credit records, and even college transcripts for Hazel Cooper. She'd moved to Millbrook not for a fresh start, but for surveillance. The nearby naval base housed the intelligence analysis unit that had planned her final mission, the same unit where the mole was likely embedded. For 3 years, she'd served coffee to naval personnel, listened to conversations, observed patterns, and slowly built a case against the person she believed had betrayed her team. She was close, very close to identifying the traitor who'd tried to have her killed. That's why she immediately noticed when 3 men who didn't belong started asking too many questions. They'd arrived separately over the past week. The first man, tall with graying temples, had claimed to be a writer researching coastal communities. The second, stocky with calloused hands that suggested military training, said he was a contractor looking for work at the base. The third, younger with nervous eyes, introduced himself as a graduate student studying local economics. Their stories might have fooled civilians, but Cross recognized the signs of a surveillance team. They asked subtle questions about base personnel, showed too much interest in specific naval officers, and maintained the kind of situational awareness that came from professional training. This morning, all 3 had arrived within minutes of each other, and taken separate tables with clear sight lines to the counter and entrance. Cross served them coffee and noted the way they avoided eye contact with each other while maintaining constant observation of the diner's other customers. She was refilling the coffee pot when Commander James Mitchell walked through the door at exactly 8:30, following his routine Tuesday schedule. Mitchell was a decorated SEAL officer who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan and now worked in intelligence analysis at the base. More importantly, he was one of the few people who might have access to the classified files that could help Cross identify the mole she'd been hunting. She'd been building toward making contact with Mitchell for months, carefully establishing herself as a trustworthy local who could be approached discreetly. Today was supposed to be the day she'd find a way to slip him a note requesting a private meeting. Instead, she watched the man with calloused hands quietly stand up, walk to the coffee station where customers could add cream and sugar, and wait for Mitchell to place his order. Cross poured Mitchell's usual, black coffee, 2 sugars, and set it on the counter. As Mitchell reached for his wallet, the nervous graduate student created a distraction by accidentally knocking over his water glass. While Cross grabbed towels to clean up the spill, she saw the contractor's hand move quickly over Mitchell's coffee cup. The motion lasted less than 2 seconds. A casual observer might have thought he was simply reaching for the sugar dispenser. But Cross had been trained to notice details that others missed, and she saw the tiny amount of white powder that dissolved instantly into the dark liquid. Poison. In that moment, Cross faced the choice that would determine whether her 3-year mission ended in success or catastrophe. She could maintain her cover, let Mitchell drink the coffee, and preserve the investigation that might expose a traitor. Or she could act on instincts honed by 12 years of life-or-death situations and save a fellow SEAL's life. There was no hesitation. "Commander Mitchell," she called out with a bright smile, "I just brewed a fresh pot in the back. This coffee's been sitting too long. Let me get you a better cup." Before Mitchell could respond, Cross had taken his coffee cup and headed toward the kitchen. The 3 men watched her movements carefully, but saw nothing suspicious in a waitress who took pride in serving fresh coffee. In the kitchen, Cross dumped the poisoned coffee and quickly analyzed her situation. 3 enemy operatives had just attempted to assassinate a U.S. Navy SEAL officer in her diner. They would need to be neutralized, but she had to do it without revealing her true identity or compromising her ongoing investigation. She had perhaps 90 seconds before the men realized their assassination attempt had failed and moved to a backup plan, which would likely involve direct violence that could endanger the dozen innocent civilians currently eating breakfast in her diner. Cross opened the utility drawer where she kept spare aprons and pulled out the equipment she'd hidden beneath the bottom liner 3 years ago. A ceramic knife that wouldn't set off metal detectors, a small vial of fast-acting sedative, and a communication device that could reach emergency services with the push of a button. She prepared a fresh cup of coffee for Mitchell, added a small amount of activated charcoal that would neutralize most common poisons if he'd already ingested any, and returned to the main dining room with the practiced smile of a small-town waitress. "Here you go, Commander," she said cheerfully, setting down the safe coffee. "Much better." Mitchell thanked her and took a sip, completely unaware that he'd just avoided assassination. The 3 operatives exchanged subtle glances, clearly realizing their primary plan had failed. Cross began clearing tables, moving in a pattern that would allow her to position herself optimally for what was about to happen. The writer was reaching into his jacket, probably for a backup weapon. The contractor was shifting his weight toward the exit, preparing to block any escape route. The graduate student was checking his phone, likely signaling for backup. She had to move now. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Cross said, approaching the writer's table with a coffee pot. "Would you like a refill?" As she leaned forward to pour, the writer's hand emerged from his jacket, holding a compact pistol with a suppressor. Before he could aim it, Cross had grabbed his wrist with her left hand while simultaneously driving the ceramic knife between his ribs with surgical precision. The blade found the exact spot that would incapacitate without killing, a technique that required intimate knowledge of human anatomy and years of close combat training. The writer collapsed silently, his weapon clattering to the floor under the table where other customers couldn't see it. "Oh my goodness," Cross said loudly. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" "You look pale." The contractor was already moving toward her, recognizing that their cover was blown. Cross grabbed the unconscious writer's coffee cup and threw the hot liquid in the contractor's face, temporarily blinding him while she closed the distance between them. He was reaching for his own weapon when Cross grabbed his head and drove her knee into his solar plexus with enough force to rupture internal organs. As he doubled over, she applied a sleeper hold that cut off blood flow to his brain. He was unconscious in 4 seconds. "Someone call 911!" Cross shouted, playing the role of a panicked waitress. "This man just collapsed." The graduate student was backing toward the door, his phone in one hand and the other reaching into his jacket. Cross picked up a butter knife from the table and threw it with the accuracy of someone who'd spent countless hours training with throwing weapons. The knife struck his phone, shattering it and cutting his hand in the process. Before he could draw his weapon, Cross was in front of him. She grabbed his gun hand and twisted until she heard the satisfying crack of breaking bones. The pistol fell to the floor as he screamed in pain. "Ma'am, stay back," she called to the other customers who were starting to panic. "I think these men might be having some kind of medical emergency." She applied pressure to specific nerve clusters in the graduate student's neck, and he joined his companions in unconsciousness. The entire encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. To the other diners, it looked like 3 customers had suffered simultaneous medical emergencies, and their waitress was trying to help while calling for emergency services. Commander Mitchell approached, his naval training allowing him to recognize that something more serious had occurred. "Hazel, are you okay?" "What happened?" Cross looked at him with the wide eyes of someone who'd just witnessed something terrifying. "I don't know, Commander. They all just collapsed. The first man was reaching for something in his jacket, and then he fell over. The other 2 started acting strange, and then they collapsed too." Mitchell knelt beside the writer and checked his pulse, then examined the other 2 men. His expression grew serious as he noticed details that a civilian wouldn't catch: the matching build and age range, the quality of their clothing, the way they were positioned throughout the diner. "Hazel," he said quietly, "I need you to lock the front door and put up the closed sign. Don't let anyone else in until the police arrive." Cross nodded and followed his instructions, while internally noting that Mitchell's tactical awareness was impressive. He'd recognized the situation as a potential security threat and was securing the scene like someone with intelligence training. Within minutes, sirens filled the air as local police, paramedics, and base security personnel responded to the emergency call. The 3 unconscious men were loaded into ambulances under heavy guard, while investigators began processing the scene. Detective Maria Santos, who'd worked with the naval base on previous incidents, took Cross's statement while crime scene technicians photographed evidence and collected the weapons that had been hidden under tables and in jacket pockets. "Miss Cooper," Detective Santos said, "this is going to sound strange, but can you walk me through exactly how 3 armed men all ended up unconscious in your diner?" Cross gave her the performance of a lifetime, playing the role of a frightened waitress who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She described how the first man had seemed to be reaching for something when he suddenly collapsed, how the second man had rushed to help and then fallen over himself, how the third man had been backing away in apparent panic when he too lost consciousness. "It happened so fast," she said, allowing her voice to shake convincingly. "I've never seen anything like it." They looked so normal when they came in this morning. Detective Santos reviewed the timeline and found it plausible, though she noted several inconsistencies that would require further investigation. The men had been found with weapons, suggesting this wasn't a medical emergency. But security cameras showed no evidence of a struggle, and the only person close enough to have attacked all 3 was a small-town waitress with no combat training. Commander Mitchell provided a statement confirming that he'd witnessed the latter part of the incident and that Ms. Cooper had appeared to be trying to help the men who'd collapsed. He made no mention of the coffee that had been replaced, though Cross noticed him watching her carefully throughout the interview. As the investigation continued, background checks on the 3 suspects revealed false identities, weapons training, and possible connections to foreign intelligence services. They'd come to Millbrook with the specific intention of targeting naval personnel, and only luck had prevented a successful assassination. Or so it appeared to everyone except Commander Mitchell. That evening, after the diner had been cleared by investigators and normal operations resumed, Mitchell returned alone just before closing time. Cross served him coffee and waited for the conversation she knew was coming. "Hazel," he said quietly, "I've been thinking about what happened this morning." "It was terrifying," she replied, maintaining her civilian persona. "I keep thinking about what might have happened if you hadn't been here to take charge." Mitchell studied her face carefully. "The thing is, I've seen a lot of combat situations, and what I witnessed today doesn't match the story we're telling investigators." Cross continued wiping down the counter, her expression neutral. "I'm not sure what you mean, Commander." 3 trained operatives don't all suffer simultaneous medical emergencies," Mitchell said, "especially not when they're carrying weapons and targeting specific individuals." "I wouldn't know anything about that. I just serve coffee." Mitchell pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. "This was taken by base security yesterday. It shows all 3 men conducting surveillance on naval personnel entering and leaving the base." Cross glanced at the photo without showing recognition. "They seemed like normal customers to me." "The man who collapsed first," Mitchell continued, "had a ceramic knife wound between his ribs, perfectly placed to incapacitate without killing. That's not an accident or a medical emergency. That's advanced combat training." Cross set down her cleaning rag and met his eyes directly. "Commander, I think you might be letting your imagination run away with you. Sometimes strange things happen, and the simple explanation is the right one." "Is it?" Mitchell leaned forward. "Because I've been thinking about other things too. Like how you immediately knew to replace my coffee this morning. Like how you moved through the chaos with tactical awareness that most civilians don't possess. Like how you managed to secure 3 weapons while appearing to help victims of medical emergencies." Cross realized that Mitchell was more observant than she'd anticipated. His intelligence background had given him the skills to analyze the situation beyond surface appearances. "I was scared and trying to help," she said. "Maybe I got lucky." Mitchell smiled grimly. "Hazel, I don't know who you really are, but I know you're not just a waitress, and I know that you saved my life this morning." Cross made a decision that would change everything about her 3-year mission. "Commander, if I were to tell you that I've been investigating possible security breaches at your base, would you be willing to listen?" Mitchell's expression shifted from suspicion to intense interest. "I'm listening." Cross checked to ensure they were alone, then locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. She led Mitchell to a corner booth where they couldn't be observed from outside. "My real name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Cross," she said. "According to official records, I died 3 years ago during a classified operation in Prague." Mitchell's eyes widened as he processed this information. "Cross, you're the SEAL who was KIA during the intelligence extraction mission." "Killed in action, yes. Except I wasn't killed. I was captured, tortured, and escaped. But during my captivity, I learned that our mission had been compromised from the inside. Someone with high-level access had fed information to enemy forces." "You're saying there's a mole in naval intelligence?" Cross nodded. "I've spent 3 years building evidence while maintaining this cover identity. The breach came from someone with access to SEAL operations planning, mission schedules, and personnel files." Mitchell leaned back, processing the implications. "And you think the mole is based here at Coronado?" "I know they are. The intelligence that compromised my mission could only have come from the analysis unit housed at this base. I've been systematically investigating personnel with the right access levels." "Jesus," Mitchell whispered, "why didn't you report this through official channels?" "Because I couldn't tell who to trust. The mole has access to everything: communications, personnel files, operational security. Going through normal channels would just alert them that I'm alive and investigating." Mitchell studied her face, evaluating her story against what he'd witnessed that morning. "The men who tried to poison me, they were connected to this?" Cross nodded. I believe they were sent to eliminate me. Someone figured out that Hazel Cooper is asking too many questions about the wrong people. But they targeted me, not you. Because killing a SEAL commander creates a crisis that requires immediate investigation. During that investigation, they could plant evidence pointing to Hazel Cooper as a foreign asset. I'd be arrested or eliminated, and the real mole would be protected. Mitchell was quiet for several minutes, processing the complexity of the situation. What evidence do you have? Cross stood up and walked to the coffee station, where she pressed a hidden panel that revealed a small compartment built into the cabinet. Inside were files, photographs, and digital storage devices containing 3 years of investigation. Financial records showing unexplained payments to personnel with access to classified information, communication patterns that correlate with enemy operational schedules, travel records that don't match official duty assignments. She handed him a manila folder. This contains everything I've gathered on the 3 most likely suspects. Mitchell opened the folder and found detailed dossiers on naval intelligence personnel, complete with financial analysis, behavioral patterns, and security assessments. The level of detail was extraordinary, the work of someone with professional intelligence training and unlimited time for surveillance. Commander Sarah Phillips, he read from the first file, Intelligence Analysis Division Chief. She has access to everything, including SEAL mission planning. Her financial records show regular deposits that don't correspond to her Navy salary. Mitchell reviewed the documentation, noting patterns that would be invisible to casual observation, but obvious to someone with intelligence training. This is solid investigative work. How did you gather all this while working as a waitress? I've been very patient, Cross said, and very careful. Naval personnel talk to waitresses differently than they talk to colleagues. People share information when they think they're safe. Mitchell continued reading. Lieutenant Commander David Chen, Operations Security Officer. Access to personnel files and mission schedules. He's made 3 unauthorized trips to locations that correlate with enemy intelligence activities. The 3rd file contained information on Captain Robert Hayes, Communications Division. Pattern of system access that doesn't match his official duties, and he was in the planning loop for my final mission. Mitchell closed the folder, his expression grave. If you're right about this, it explains several security incidents that we haven't been able to source. I'm right, Cross said with certainty, and after this morning, they know I'm close to exposing them. What's your next move? Cross had been planning this moment for months. I need to get into the base intelligence facility to access communication logs that aren't available through external surveillance. But I can't do it as Hazel Cooper, and I can't do it as Sarah Cross without triggering every security protocol on the base. Mitchell understood immediately. You need someone with legitimate access to bring you in. I need a partner who can verify my identity through official channels without alerting the wrong people. Mitchell considered the request carefully. Cross was asking him to risk his career and potentially his life on the word of someone who was supposed to be dead. But her story explained too many inconsistencies, and her actions that morning had demonstrated both capability and loyalty. If I help you, he said, and you're wrong about this, we both end up in military prison. If I'm wrong, Cross replied, then you can turn me in yourself. But if I'm right and we don't act soon, more people are going to die. Mitchell made his decision. What do you need? Over the next hour, Cross outlined a plan that would allow her to access the intelligence facility's secure communication logs while maintaining plausible deniability for Mitchell. It required precise timing, multiple contingencies, and a level of operational security that would challenge even experienced intelligence professionals. Tomorrow night, she said, there's a change of shift at 2000 hours. Security protocols are reduced for 15 minutes during the transition. Mitchell nodded. I can get you into the building, but once we're inside, you'll need to access the systems without triggering automated security alerts. I have the technical skills, Cross assured him. SEAL training includes advanced computer infiltration. The bigger challenge is extracting the data without leaving traces that could be detected later. They spent another 30 minutes reviewing building layouts, security procedures, and extraction routes. Cross had been observing the base for 3 years, but Mitchell's insider knowledge filled gaps in her intelligence that would be crucial for mission success. As they prepared to leave, Mitchell asked the question that had been troubling him since their conversation began. "Sarah, when this is over, what happens to you? Officially, you're dead. There's no easy way to bring you back." Cross had considered this question many times over the past 3 years. "If we expose the mole and prevent future security breaches, I'll find a way to disappear again. Hazel Cooper can move to another town, start another life. That's not much of an existence. It's better than being buried in a grave that should have been empty," she replied. "And it's better than letting a traitor continue to endanger SEAL operations." Mitchell admired her dedication, but wondered about the personal cost of living a false identity indefinitely. "There might be other options. Official channels for bringing you back once the security threat is neutralized." Cross shook her head. "Too many people would ask too many questions. It's easier if Sarah Cross stays dead." They agreed to meet the following evening at a location near the base where Mitchell could provide Cross with temporary credentials that would allow her to enter the facility. The plan was dangerous, but both understood that the alternative, allowing enemy assets to continue compromising naval operations, was unacceptable. After Mitchell left, Cross began preparing for what might be her final mission. She reviewed contingency plans for different scenarios, encrypted her investigation files for secure transmission, and wrote a letter explaining everything she'd had discovered in case something went wrong. For 3 years, she had lived as Hazel Cooper, serving coffee and gathering intelligence. Tomorrow night, she would resume her identity as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Cross and complete the mission that had started in a basement in Prague. But first, she had one more day of being a small-town waitress who poured coffee and smiled at customers, while 3 enemy operatives remained unconscious in a military hospital, and a traitor somewhere on the naval base continued to believe their secret was safe. Cross locked up Murphy's Diner and walked home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, knowing that by tomorrow night, everything would change. The waitress who had served apple pie and refilled coffee cups would disappear forever, replaced by a SEAL who had spent 3 years preparing for the most important mission of her career. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates, and sometimes that's exactly how they prefer it. The next evening would determine whether 3 years of patience and sacrifice had been enough to expose a traitor and protect the operations that depended on absolute security. For Lieutenant Commander Sarah Cross, alias Hazel Cooper, the mission was almost complete. She just had to survive long enough to finish it. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.